Are you ready for a little tooting and booting?
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess, and thank you so much for joining me here today as we are tooting and booting October's performances by your one and only Calgary Flames. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. So I came up with this idea back in August. Basically, tooting and booting. If you the Flames performances. If you don't know what toot or boot is, you're missing out. It is Raja and Raven from RuPaul's Drag Race, approving toot, or booting, disapproving outfits of other drag queens. So we are just doing it for Flames players and their performances. We're going to start with October's overall performance, and we can boot that to the moon. If you are enjoying any sort of the start to this season, I don't know if this is the podcast for you because I feel like you might be a fan of a different team, but it has been quite the tumultuous start, and while there is time to recover and stop the skid, we haven't seen that yet. So 19 goals in 9 games is not good. That's not good. Tyler Toffoli and Sean Monahan has 5 goals this season, and Huberdeau and Kadri don't even have that combined. So makes you think. And people are saying that, the Flames will trade for Sean Monahan at the deadline. That's not happening. This team will be selling at the deadline. This team, at first I thought it might have been a little fluke, them getting back into the swing of things, but it hasn't been. This team has looked like they have gone out there blindfolded each and every single night. I don't know. I compared it to a kid being spun around and blindfolded at a birthday party when you're like going to smack the piñata. That is what this team looks like when they go out on the ice. Just completely confused, disoriented, and like they forgot how to do the basic things. If you've ever been blindfolded and swung at a piñata, you know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. And if you're watching the games, you know exactly what I'm talking about too. Ryan Huska has done what he can do. There is only so much coaches can do in order to get their players going and get them together. This is not like when Jeff Ward was the coach and it really was a coaching issue. He couldn't, get this team going, and there was high-end talent on the team, but it just wasn't receptive. The roster was constructed completely differently. This roster that they have now should be able to take themselves off of the ground and should be taking, a liking to Mark Savard's power play structure. And that I am so shocked that they are 20th in the league on the power play right now. It is unbelievable because the expectation was for them to be top 10. When you have an offensive-minded genius like Mark Savard generating your power play setup and your structure, your system, you would expect the players to be able to follow that and replicate success and bring that success to fruition. We have not seen any success, and it is November 1st. We're still very early into the season, and I cannot stress that enough. But we got to just kind of, again, just boot this whole season, or the whole start to the season, rather, to the moon and really start over. It's a new month, a new day. It's November. You're playing against Dallas, who's a much better team than you, but they're also off to a slower start. So why can't you take advantage of this opportunity, right? They should take complete advantage of tonight's game. And I would love nothing more than for this team to actually score goals tonight. Jake Ottinger's in net, but that does not mean they cannot score. This is not the team that put the Russian hex on Ottinger. That was an entirely different team. That's wild to think that was just 2 years ago at this point. Wow, that feels like a lifetime ago. But yeah, no, the overall performance of the Flames for October, to the point where contract extension negotiations have stopped, you gotta do some reflecting there and look inside, and maybe you request a trade, because you're probably doing the Flames a favor. Because if a player like Noah Hanifin or Elias Lindholm say, "Get me out of here," and they get out, I mean, they're either leaving now or at the end of the season, so I might as well get something for them. They're doing the organization a favor by leaving now rather, in July. But I don't know. It's got to be pretty intense, and I would love to be a fly on the wall in the locker room and some of the operations meetings as well. But coming up next, we are going to do some player evaluations, because just when you think they can't get any more disappointing, they do, but sometimes they give you a reason to believe. And before we move on to that, we are going to take a quick break here and talk about Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish that you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job boards looking for candidates with the right skills when you can find them all right there on Indeed. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Something that I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring super easy, and it's all in one place. So you don't have to be bouncing around, and you can do interviews on Indeed as well, which is fantastic because you're not spending forever trying to find the correct link. So Indeed knows when you are growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applicants that match your must-have requirements. All you need to do is visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames as we just talk all about October and what we're tooting and what we're booting, because there's plenty of booting to be done. But what about a nice little tooting? We'll get there in a minute. But Jonathan Huberdeau, we're booting. We gotta boot him. Strictly because of the lack of production. The eye test. Now, I'm not always a firm believer in like stats are better than the eye test, or the eye test is better than what like stats. To me, they each come into play in different ways, because this team, the Flames, are known for scoring ugly goals. So when the team's not looking nice and they don't pass the eye test, but they're scoring 2 or 3 goals, are you going to sit there and say, oh, well, they're not doing well. I don't think that's the case, and that should be the case in how you evaluate the game. But Jonathan Huberdeau has 5 points in 9 games. He is not a point per game player, but that's slightly over 50% if my math is correct. We just need to see more from Huberdeau. Again, we've been saying the same thing for the last 2.5 weeks. You need more out of Huberdeau. I went easy on him to start the season because, again, it had been 3 games and people were just coming for him and saying that, bench him. You're not benching a $10.5 million player. And when you put a $10.5 million player on the third line, what kind of message is that sending? You might be able to get your team going with that, but arguments to be made about the Flames roster construction and why Huberdeau shouldn't be on the top line. You also don't lose all that talent in 18 months. So I don't think we need to completely write this off yet. I don't. I am very eager to see more of a pickup in production from him. I think that the entire team needs to start producing, but especially a guy that's making $10.5 million a year. Elias Lindholm, 6 points in 9 games. I will toot this. 13 minutes, and we finally have our first toot of the episode. 6 points in 9 games is, I will take it. You know what? He has had some questionable wingers through this first stretch. Dylan Dubé and Dryden Hunt up on that top line. Like, what are we doing here? Obviously, you need someone to fill out those roster spots, but I don't think that those were the smartest and most successful players to put on that line to assemble a line. But I do think that Huska is doing a lot of this stuff to send a message, and players get it. They do. They're not dumb. But the thing with Elias Lindholm is I am so glad that they did not sign any extension prior to the season. Could you imagine him making $9 million starting next year? And people, oh my God, and this is how his season starts right after he signs the contract. Could you imagine the narrative? Oh, he just wanted his money and now he's just going to ride it out. I'm not entirely sure that that's how this works. I mean, maybe when you get a raise, you might kind of just take your foot off the gas a little bit, but you're never going to convince an athlete to not play well. I don't think that that's how it works. They're not wired like that. And it's not that straightforward. It can't be that straightforward. So I do think that Lindholm is in for a decent season. Unless he somehow manages to rack up a point per game or like 2 points per game through the end of the season, like from starting tonight here on out, there's no way he is earning a $9 million contract. It makes virtually no sense to give him that kind of contract to begin with. But then with how things are going, this isn't like basketball where you just give out max contracts left and right and your bench players are making like 11 bajillion dollars a season. I just want more. Maybe that's insatiable. Maybe it's ungrateful. Or maybe I just want this team to win a game. We start with one win. That one game at a time. And we'll get there eventually. Don't know when, but they'll get there. Andrew Mangiapane gets another toot. You know why? Because that, not because of the hair plugs. Are those real or are those photoshopped? Like I haven't really seen him without the helmet on or anything. So, or his hair formally styled. So Andrew Mangiapane is working his way back through from shoulder surgery, and not just like, oh, I got dinged up at the end of the season and, I have to just have surgery. He pretty much played with an injured shoulder all last season. So he was not doing himself any favors and was just making the injury worse by prolonging any sort of surgery or treatment. I think you obviously have to rehab any shoulder surgery, any surgery, but to rehab an injury, like an injury that's been lingering for a significant amount of time like that, is a lot harder than doing something that, like, who was it? Noah Hannafin a few, like 2 or 3 seasons ago. He busted his shoulder right before the Flames didn't make the playoffs that year, and he was out. Season ended. That's a lot easier to treat and recover from. More so recover than treat. I'm sure shoulder surgeries are pretty routine. As we can see by Chris Tanev and Mangiapane's matching shoulder scars. But I do think Mangiapane is going to have a better November. His October was good. So there's really no reason for there not to be more success behind him. And our last player before we move on is Dylan Dubé. Dylan Dubé missed practice earlier this week prior to the game against the Stars. Kind of rumored that he was going to be a scratch in the game against the Stars, but no one really thought much of it. Figured, it was kind of due to his performance so far this season and being that defensive liability. But he is not playing tonight at all. And I believe Huska called it a maintenance. No, he said it was upper body, I believe. But, maybe it's for the better that he's a little dinged up. And Connor Zary gets his first shot at the NHL, which is so exciting. And for Dubé to, sit back and watch the game, because it is a lot different looking at it down from the press box than it is when you're on the ice, and you start to pick up the little mistakes and what you can improve on. Coming up next, we are going to wrap up the show with some goaltending and defensive talk, because what is this team without the back end? And we are going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to tell you all about the Sleeper app. A new NHL season brings you all sorts of possibilities. You never know. Elias Lindholm may score 50 goals. The Flames could hoist the Stanley Cup. Nothing's impossible here. And you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. I would personally bet on none of the Flames players, because I don't really have much faith in them. I wouldn't put any money on that, but I would certainly bet on McDavid props, Carr, the obvious choices here, some Marc-Andre Fleury props as well, put him in, guess those player stat predictions and get them right. And to win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That is code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks everyone for hanging around and listening to Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you're getting your shows, and of course on YouTube as well. As I mentioned before, Connor Zary is making his NHL debut tonight, which is so exciting, and we are going to give that a Toot, because who does not love a good moment like that? He's played 134 AHL games, I believe, and has racked up 100 points. He has earned this shot. He struggled with injuries to really start his professional career. Didn't help that he was coming in during the middle of a pandemic and didn't really have like a true introduction to professional hockey, and then was met with injuries. So it's really nice to see. He was sitting third in the AHL, I believe, in scoring. So we are going to pay close attention to how Connor Zary does tonight. But we need to start talking about the defense. Jacob Markstrom, you get a toot. You know why? Because you're the only Flames player that's looking like you care, that's looking clocked in, dialed in, locked in, whatever phrase you want to use to show how ready Jacob Markstrom is. That's what you can use, because I truly think that he is bouncing back, and it's the defense. It is the defense that is kind of costing him some of those goals. And yeah, he does it to himself too, but I really do think a lot of it comes down more on the defensive breakdown. And speaking of the defense, what on earth is going on with Noah Hanifin? I feel like he has not looked like himself. We talked about it on yesterday's show too, talking about how he is on the ice for more goals against than not good. And same with Chris Tanev. The only defenseman that I would toot is Mackenzie Weegar, because from the efforts we've seen, he's there. He is completely there. Rasmus Anderson, you get booted to the moon because you got suspended and you did something really dumb. You don't deserve any sort of praise for that, and he's bound to make his return here soon. So I look forward to seeing what his presence in the lineup does. I would really like to believe that the Flames will be a little bit better with shooting at 5-on-5 and on the power play, because Rasmus Anderson does have that nasty one-timer, and him and Coronado are both really good shooters. So we will have to see where that goes. Nikita Zadorov is getting the boot as well, just because he's just been good for throwing hits. I don't have the utmost confidence in him. I did not see a player card graph for him. I really like those when you can do the metrics and see, if they're positive or negative. I would guarantee that most of those metrics are negative, just because of the product on the ice and just how he plays as a defenseman. Would I like to see more toots? Yeah. Will we be doing this at the start of December? Yes. And we're going to have a lot more to talk about, hopefully plenty more positives than negatives at the end of this month. So make sure that you're subscribed to Locked On Flames so you don't miss a toot or boot. And I look forward to hearing your opinions as well. And, there are a handful of players I didn't talk about. So who would you, assign a toot or a boot? My other player I was going to mention was Matthew Coronado. I feel like he is a toot just because it is his first NHL season, and he started off really strong, and it wasn't sustainable to begin with, and all the shuffling. Poor kid needs a little consistency. But that does it for today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. We are here for you 5 days a week, and I'll be back tomorrow for a recap of the Stars game. And I will see you all, like I said, tomorrow. And you can follow me on Twitter. Find the show wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. And until then, stay safe, stay hydrated, and be kind.